The Songwriter Chapter 9. Back at the Crossroads. A songwriter's life is not an easy life, bringing music and songs to the streets. Many would say it's a wasted time and effort, but I'd rather be chasing dreams than chained to a job by a golden handcuff. Give me a six string while I am still able to play it underneath a lamppost, or on some corner, or in a tunnel, or on a bus, not knowing what tomorrow will bring. Singing in the rain has a reward of its own. The music of life happens in its own time. A life of uncertainties where the unknown awaits the people and places that pass by in the eyes of the troubadour. I sat waiting for the bus to Belfast and Parnell Quay bus station in Cork with all that I owned. A book of bus passes and an overnight bag full of my songs and my six-string guitar. I had no job, no friends, no family, no ID. I had spent the night there in the waiting room. It was cold but safe. When the bus pulled in at dawn, I got on board and kissed Cork goodbye. We were rolling down the little country roads, Belfast bound. There were three of us on the bus apart from me, and the small towns passed by like snapshots of a truffle brochure left on a park bench. I looked at the passengers, a teenage girl, a bald-headed student, and the driver. I thought to myself, we don't get to pick the people we meet sometimes. Just like passengers on a bus or on a train or a plane. They are with us briefly for a while and they get off and leave us behind. Maybe the same can be said for those acquaintances we have through our life, here and gone in a brief moment of time. I thought I'd share a few of my songs with the passengers on the bus, but I remembered the driver put my guitar in the outside baggage compartment. It wasn't long before the bus pulled in to the town of Rosscray. The driver parked on the side of the main street and said to the three of us, "Well, no, you can all go and stretch your legs. No need to worry, no. I know everyone on board. Off you go and have a walk around the town or a pint or stout, because the last stop before the border is here. We'll see you back here in about an hour." I thought I'd go check out the town and buy a postcard to send over to Australia, just so my family would know where I was and that I was still alive. In one of the shops I saw a second-hand digital watch. The time said it had just passed midday, so I made a mental note to get back at the bus for 1 o'clock. My mind was a little troubled about leaving my songs and my guitar on the bus. It wasn't that often when we parted company. I convinced myself they were in good hands and kept walking around the town where I was a complete stranger to everyone I saw, which made me feel quite at home. The town of Rosscray is situated right in the middle of Ireland and borders 4 counties: Offaly, Laois, Tipperary and Clare. Some would say that it's the only town that can boast of a feat like that. Some would argue that is a record to write in the books. Apart from that, Rosscray, for its size, has a lot to offer. There were shops, a movie theatre, restaurants, discos and pubs. I bought a few postcards and found the post office. It looked like a strange sort of post office. There was no counter and I couldn't see the shop assistant there. I climbed up the stairs thinking they must operate the post office from up there. I saw a gents' toilet to the first floor there and went for a quick visit. When I had finished, I came out of the gents and was met by a large guard, who was shocked to see me there and asked, "What you doing here?" I replied, I'm using the gents' toilet." He said, "You're not allowed in here. Don't you know you're in the Garda station?" I said, "No, I thought I was in the post office." He said, "Come with me straight away." I followed him into the superintendent's office, where I was questioned thoroughly for 20 minutes. After I managed to convince him that I was on a bus to Belfast, I was permitted to leave free of charge. I ran all the way back to where the bus was parked at the bottom of the hill outside the pub, but to my shock and horror, there was no bus there. I asked some people where the bus to Belfast was. Most of them didn't seem to know. One or two weren't even aware that there had been a bus to Belfast at all. I felt ashamed, shattered, lost, ran away back to the guard station. I was greeted very cautiously by the guard at the front desk. I was out of breath and also speaking very fast, so he couldn't understand a word that I said. It took about a half an hour before the guard got the message that the bus to Belfast was now minus one of its passengers. I tried to explain that everything I owned was on that bus. The guard took a description of my personal belongings and he proceeded to file that away, saying, "So, what is the purpose of your business in Belfast?" "I'm a musician seeking employment and I may have some work there," I replied. "Right, sir, now, just give me a moment," he said as he lifted up the police radio, and with a commanding tone to his voice he said, "This is Chief Superintendent at the Rosscray here now. Is that the Athlone bus depot?" The call came back. This is Athlone bus depot. Station, what can I do for you, Chief?" "I got a man here from the guard station who was left behind by the bus on its way to Belfast. All his belongings are on board. I take the description of them and filed that away here now. I'd like to ask you to pull off the bus those things when it arrives: a small suitcase, a guitar, and a red case and a cap." The man from Athlone came back and said, "I'll do that, Chief. What about the owner of the property?" "The next bus to Belfast comes through Rosscray Monday, so I'd say he would be on board that. Could you leave all the belongings with the station master in Loth's property? He'll pick them up personally himself, and the owner's name now is Paul McCann. Thank you, over." The call came back. "I'll take you. I'll do that, Mike. Now, did you see the football last night? Did you see McCarthy's goal? What do you think of it?" And the reply came, "I know, wasn't it a bit of all right, Jack? Anyway, I'd better be going. I've got a heap of work to get through now. Bye." Well, I can tell you, I was glad to know all my things were in good hands, so I started to breathe a little easier. I looked at the guard and I said, "Well, it looks like I'll be a guest in your town for a few days. Could you recommend a place to stay?" He scratched his head and called his assistant in and asked, "Do you know of a decent guest house in town?" The reply was immediate. "The Yellow House is about the best place now, down by the mill road near to the string, Chief." I was given further directions on how to find the place and thanked the guard for their trouble. Then I walked out the station and into a bar half packed with people, and cigarette smoke hung thickly in the air. There was chatter going on around the room and I sat down on a stool by the bar. I asked the barman for a pint of Murphy's. Suddenly a deathly silence fell all around the room. Every eye in the place was on me and I wondered what was going on. And the barman said with a touch of anger in a harsh Irish accent, "We don't sell Murphy's here." "OK, then I'll have a pint of Guinness," I replied. And immediately people started to talk again and the barman smiled. And I realised then and there of the great rivalry between Murphy's, the stout brewed in Cork, and Guinness, the stout brewed in Dublin. It seems you have serious Guinness drinkers all over the place, and the same can be said for Murphy drinkers. I was told that there are Guinness pubs and Murphy pubs. That's just how things are, so you have to know exactly whereabouts you are before you order a pint of stout. After another pint, I made my way to the stream, and then I booked in for the weekend at the Yellow House there. That evening after dinner, and a shave and a warm bath, I decided to treat myself to a night out and go see Scrooge at the movie theatre in town. After the movie, I found a disco there at the top of the town and went to listen to some music for a while. I rambled back to the yellow house in the small hours of the morning, and I was feeling okay. I had a night to remember in Rosscray, and that night before I went to sleep I began to reflect on my journey that I'd been on. Personally for me, I think that Cork was the highlight so far, with its love of music and old charms streaming out of the work and out of the people's hearts. And the word that I had in my heart was the way that the people in Cork would open their hearts and their doors to you. And I loved the feeling in their hearts of the things that they said and done, and the way that they showed their love in a caring way that could repair the damage done by things unsaid, like an innocence of people not caught up with the hustle and bustle of busy lives. And my own heart was at peace as I looked out the window of my room and watched the stream trickle slowly past. As soon as my head touched the pillow, I went unconscious. The morning light peeped through the curtains, and the silence of the street was broken by the sound of footsteps thumping and high heels tapping on the pavement below outside. Then I heard the clanging of a bell, and I realised it was the chimes for Mass, and the faithful were on their way to Sunday service. I got up and got dressed in a hurry because I wanted to follow behind the footsteps to see where the church was. Before long, I was in with a procession of people, and after about 10 minutes, we arrived in a field where a very old and quaint granite stone church was standing. Inside the church, not an empty seat could be seen anywhere. So I stood with the rest of the people and I listened to the Mass that was said in Gaelic. After the Mass was over, I returned to the Yellow House and sat there with the owners, sharing some stories and talking about life. They made me feel very welcome in their home, and they cooked a roast dinner for me. I left the Yellow House on the Monday morning to catch the Belfast bus. By the time it arrived, it was midday. I spoke with the driver and produced another pass from my book of tickets. The bus rolled along through 10 towns before we made a stop on the way to Athlone. I was the only passenger on the bus. When we arrived at the bus depot, the driver said, "Well, this is as far as I go. You'll have to change now for the Ulster bus." I asked him what time did it leave Athlone, and he said, "Well, no, to be honest, I really don't know. Ask the station master. He'll be able to tell you that now. Good luck." As I got off the bus, a few people got on the bus. Then I made my way through the station at Athlone in search of the station master. Everyone was having lunch. There were no sign of people around at all, no sign of the station master, porters or shopkeepers, and it felt eerie. The general public sat around reading newspapers and books. Some were eating sandwiches and sipped tea from flasks. I went outside the station to see if there was anybody I could speak to find out how long lunch would be. I said hello to a little donkey there and a few people who only spoke in Gaelic. I walked around for a while and found this old shed with a sign that said Station Master's Office. I knocked on the door softly before I walked inside. In a dimly lit room, behind a dusty old desk, sat an old man with a cap on his head and a cat on his lap. At first I thought it was a statue until he moved and spoke. "Can I help you, sir?" He was nearly in tears after I told him my story and all of the things I'd been through. And he pointed to the corner of the room and he said, "I guess those must belong to you." Sitting there was my hat, my guitar, as well as my bag of songs, and I was never so happy to see anything else before. I thanked him for his time and kindness. I was going to give him a hug, but just then he pulled out a bottle of poteen from the drawer of his desk. He had a swig, and he said, "I never know what time of the day it is sometimes." And he pointed to the clock on his wall, for it only had a big hand and the small hand was missing. I said, "Thank you for looking after my stuff." "You're welcome. Come again." I turned and walked out the door. Inside the bus depot, some of the shutters were being lifted and a few of the shops were opening again. I had almost given up hope that I was in a bus depot and not the Twilight Zone. Some of the staff now were back on duty. This fellow with a large broom was sweeping up the floor, and every now and then he would swoop down and pick up a paper cup off the floor. I'm not an expert to me, but he looked like a professional. I asked him if he knew when the bus to Belfast would arrive. He wasn't too sure, and he said, "Well, it's a bit unpredictable these days. There's always something going on around the border." And he continued to sweep up the floor. He started me thinking then again about the Troublesome Belfast, because I hadn't been home for many years, and part of me just forgot how bad it really was there. I wondered how it was these days. I got in the queue to board the bus. The driver checked everyone's tickets as we got on the bus. As soon as we pulled out of Athlone, I noticed there was a tension in the air. No one was speaking, it was quiet. The border was now left behind, and we were on a small country road full of potholes, heading towards Belfast. It was twilight now, and the verdant green hills were dissolving into the shadows of the night that was falling fast. The street lamps were now lit, and we passed through town after town until we hit the bright lights of Belfast City. I was home again, and the bus pulled into Great Victoria Street Station. People got to their feet and started to shuffle off the bus. The shuffle became a hurry-scurry as if they were being chased. Drops of rain were now starting to fall as I made my way from the bus depot to get a taxi for my Aunt Lily's house in Jamaica Way in Ardoyne. It was a quiet night in Belfast, and there was no sign of trouble anywhere. I got to Castle Street and I got into the taxi stand. 10 minutes I was on my way in a black taxi. When we got there, I took off my stuff and I said to the taxi driver, "Thank you," and made my way to knock upon my Aunt Lily's door, but was greeted by a group of men with a barrel of a gun at my back. And a deep Belfast accent said, "You're coming with us." So I had come home to Belfast like a little lost lamb. I was taken by the big bad wolf to a house. I was given a dining chair to sit on, and then my hands and feet were handcuffed. A group of 5 young men sat down on a sofa and 2 armchairs. They started to throw questions at me like fish from a tongue. Before I had the chance to answer any of them, I was answered by one of those who would throw another question. "Hey, Buck Rogers, you're not from round here, are you? Show me some of your ID." "Buck Rogers from the 21st century, are you?" And I said to them, "I don't have any ID. I was robbed in London. They took all my ID, but I can tell you, I know your mummy and daddy, and I remember your face. I went to St. Gabriel's School in Butler Street. I have people here who can speak for me." One of them jumped up from the sofa and he looked into my face. "Who the hell are you?" Another one of them said, "You're a Brit undercover." And I answered, "No, this is where I used to live years ago, when you were all still in your nappies." "What are you doing here?" I replied, "I'm a songwriter. I just came home from Australia to visit my relatives in Ardoyne." "So you're a songwriter? Well, give us one of your songs then." "Buck, my name's Paul, and if you take these cuffs off my hands, I'll play you a song." Then a handgun was produced and passed around. Also, some money was being exchanged amongst them. A phone call was made. One of them brought in a case of beer and placed it on the floor. One by one, they all started drinking. "I need to use the toilet," I said. And one of them responded, "Take off the cuffs of his hands and go with him." My hands were uncuffed, but not my feet, so I hopped like a kangaroo into the bathroom, and I was watched by one of the group until I was finished. I felt that my life was hanging by a thread. Those who interrogated me had a look in their eyes that spoke of trouble and desperation. When I returned, they gave me my guitar and they said, "Give us one of your songs." I thought to myself, well, if this would be the last song I would ever play, I'm going to play it with a Christian theme. So I played them a song that I wrote called I'm Falling in Love with Jesus. One man alone but walked among all, carried the cross and 3 times did fall, and he rose to his feet, no more he could stop. When he looked round, there were no friends at all. I'm falling in love with Jesus. I'm falling in love with him. I love him because he loves me too, and he sets me free from sin. His body was sore and oh so weak, but no words of hatred did he ever speak. His mother was there, and him she did see. She looked at his face, so kind and so meek. Yes, I'm falling in love with Jesus. I'm falling in love with him. I love him because he loves me too, and sets me free from sin. They just did not know that he could not die. All they could do was just crucify. When 3 days had passed in the tomb, he did lie. He rose up from death to glory on high. Yes, I'm falling in love with Jesus. I'm falling in love with him. I love him because he loves me too, and sets me free from sin. A strange thing happened. The terrorists, picking up the melody then of the song, began to sing along with me, and the song was finished. One of them then said, "Sing another one of your songs." So I made one up on the spot called Wee Willie Winkie, using a 12-bar blues progression and adapting some of the lyrics from the nursery rhyme. Wee Willie Winkie's running through the town, upstairs, downstairs, even in the crown, leaning on a lamppost and the girls pass by. Wee Willie Winkie winks him in the eye 'cause he's shy, and he's fly, that's Wee Willie Winkie. Wee Willie Winkie, he hasn't got a clue, knocking on wood, doesn't know what to do. Fingers in the keyholes, picking all the locks. Wee Willie Winkie's gotta get who rocks. You know he's shy and he's fly, that's Wee Willie Winkie. Oh, Wee Willie Winkie, he could do with a hand. He wants to be a leader of a rock and roll band. He's shy and he's fly, that's Wee Willie Winkie. That's Wee Willie Winkie. The group were drinking and laughing and singing, and after the song was over, one of the group grabbed my guitar, another rushed at me with a pillow put over a handgun, and he pushed it against the side of my right temple and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The gun didn't fire. "You're the luckiest man in Belfast," one of them said. And I asked him, "What? What's your name?" And he answered, "My name's Barbara." "You can go," said one of the group. I was in shock and answered, "What? You're free to go. We can't condemn you twice." He replied, and they took the handcuffs off my feet. "We'll call you lucky, okay, Skin?" "Oh, all right, Barbara," I said. As I got to my feet, one of them said to me, "We're having a party later on tonight if you want to come over and join us." "Sure, I'll think about it," I replied. Lucky indeed was I to be still alive and in one piece. My thoughts were scattered and I was shaking, and as I walked, I needed a place to just sit down and sit for a while in the stillness and think about what had happened. Then I remembered this old football pitch where I played as a young lad when I was in Graceville United. So I wandered over there to the bone pitches and sat there upon the side of the dumps, just staring blankly like a lamb who had just escaped from the slaughterhouse. The rain started to fall and I closed my eyes and I felt this soft distilled taste flow from my lips to my tongue, and the rain fell on my face and I didn't mind at all getting a soaking. I sat on the top of the dumps and I opened my eyes and I looked at the little rooftops of the houses in my village of Ardoyne. I sat in a daze for a while and thanked God I was still alive, even though part of me secretly didn't care if the gun had gone off, because for me it would have been an end to this nightmare that I was living in. Suddenly I heard a sporadic burst of gunfire that was nearby, and it spurred me into action, and I jumped up and run to my Aunt Lily's house, knocked on her door, and when she opened the door and looked at me kind of strange like, I said, "Hello, Aunt Lily, I just thought I'd call to say hello." She answered, "Come in, son, you're soaked. I'll get you some dry clothes to put on." The gunfire outside was still going on, but never once did she seem to take notice. She brought me some clean clothes and she said, "Put these on, they belong to Brian. He's overseas away in London working. I go put the kettle on and we'll have a cup of tea." So after I was then in my clean clothes, I sat down on the sofa and Aunt Lily put my bags and my guitar away upstairs. And then when she returned, she said to me, "Are you okay now?" I said, "Thanks, Aunt Lily." "You're welcome," she answered. She lit up a cigarette and she lifted her cup from the saucer and drank from her tea, and the gunfire was still continuing, and then a bomb went off outside nearby. I never even bothered Aunt Lily at all. She barely even noticed what was going on. I suppose she must have got used to that. "It's nice to see you again, Aunt Lily," I said. "So, what have you been doing?" she answered. I wasn't able to really tell her what had happened to me and where I had been for the last year or two. Just sightseeing around the place, you know," I answered. "You're welcome to stay here for a while," she said. And so I did. I stayed with Aunt Lily and even got a job as a furniture polisher for Ironwood Furniture in Carrickfergus. I was very lucky to have a job, as many people were on the unemployment benefits. On the weekends I went busking into the city amongst all of the armed police and the British soldiers who responded to bomb scares very frequently. And I sang my songs to the people of my hometown in Belfast. The drunks and the punks, the mothers and the lovers, terrorists and tourists, the blind and the kind ones, the mad and sad ones, and the brave few who give me a few shillings busking there on the corner. One Saturday morning as I was standing in Cornmarket busking, Barbara and a few of the boys walked past and shouted, "Hey there, Lucky, how's it going?" he said. "Aye, okay, what about you, Barbara?" I shouted back. "See you skin," one of them said. At that moment in time I was feeling a bit like standing at the crossroads again, not knowing if I should stay in Belfast or leave and return to London, because there was things I needed to do, like get my passport from Australia House, where maybe they could help me as well to get some peace of mind and get back to Australia, because the Australian consulate in Belfast had closed due to the Troubles. I also wanted to call in and see Pat and Lambeth and tell them a few stories about what had been happening. I also felt trapped in a situation with no escape, still with no ID or adrift from the ability to return to Australia. It was clear that I needed to recover the fragments of my life, and that someday, perhaps in the very near future, I could return. So the only choice for me that I had was another trip across the water to England. It was my only thing I had to do. So I thought about the ferry from Belfast to Liverpool, and that would be the best way to go. And during that time, though, I Belfast with Aunt Lily, I had written to the local mayor of Marylons in Sydney, and I'd known him for a few years and explained the whole situation to him. He in turn had mentioned to the Australian authorities in London, who were now aware of my situation. So now I had a letter from the Australian government that I was able to provide to anyone that wanted to know of my situation. The thought of going to Liverpool was encouraging for me, as I recall 4 very famous musicians who came from there, and they were in a band called the Beatles. I thought surely I might be able to get a lucky break with my songs over there, and I could hardly wait for the opportunity to go busking my songs in Liverpool. The end of chapter 9.